I haven't really stayed in communication with anybody.
Yeah.
This will show it.
When I saw your name and all that. Yeah.
Second term, I'm the chair, we're nominating and voting on new officers.
He rescinded that, I think, right? Jay?
Yes, he did. He's
Okay.
no longer.
All right. Okay. Something,
Does that meet the requirement? Singing on the beach in the Virgin Islands?
he's apparently in the airport now.
Okay. I'm voting against it.
I kidded with him. I'm like, I'm not gonna allow this. That, you know, if you were in Topeka, that'd be another story, but British Virgin Islands, go get that.
A free trip,
Yeah.
at least a free lodging. BJ.
Or at your pleasure, Brian.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Land Conservation Board meeting. Today is January 26, 2023. Time is 5:31. This is our first meeting since October. Glad to have everybody back. Good to see you. Let's start with the approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
We did have one consideration for the agenda.
Yes,
Just, we'd like to move old business to number 6 after the staff updates.
all right, very good. I don't think we need to vote on that. We will just move 6A to now be 8D. Existing 8D will be 8E. Right, I heard a motion to approve the agenda. Do I hear a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right. We are electing new officers for 2023. I do understand that Ed is willing to continue to serve as vice chair. I would be happy and privileged to continue to serve as chair unless somebody else wants a turn. Anybody have any interest in either of those positions or as secretary?
I would like to run for vice chair.
All right. Anyone else?
You were like looking for volunteers to do secretary, or are you asking me if I?
You got stuck with it last time, so yes, I'm looking for volunteers. We are looking for volunteers. I don't know that, I know we don't have a policy on this, but I think in particular, the secretary position should be a revolving one where everybody on the board needs to have their turn in the barrel.
I'll volunteer.
Okay, very good. So we have 2 offers as vice chair, 1 offer as secretary, and
An angel.
Huh?
An angel.
yes. Well, unless there's anybody else who wants to volunteer or chime in, you can take nominations.
Any of the non-present members indicate interest in them?
PJ did express interest. No, PJ didn't. It was Ed. Yeah.
So someone has to nominate Melissa for her.
I believe that's the case.
I will nominate Melissa for vice chair.
And I'll second.
I don't think there's any particular order that we need to do these, so. All those in favor of having Melissa Hill be our new vice chair, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations, vice chair. And thank you.
Your vice, so.
She's winning.
I guess I'm free to nominate people. I will nominate Kristen based on her volunteerism for secretary. Any other discussion on it? All those in favor, Kristen Young being our new secretary, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Congratulations.
Who seconded Melissa's,
I didn't see.
Kate?
Kate did. Believe based on recollection that we have our new officers start at our next board meeting. Is that correct? Yeah.
Who's the you nominated, who's the second for secretary?
I second.
Melissa.
Melissa.
That leaves chair.
I nominate Brian for chair. I'll second.
Have been nominated and seconded. Any other nominations? All right. All those in favor of my continuing as chair, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, don't be afraid. Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you all. I appreciate it very much. All right. Approval of the minutes from October 27th, 2022.
Motion to approve.
I second.
All
Can I
those-
actually second minutes?
Why not?
Because I wrote.
Yes.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. We have one evaluation this evening, Alachua Creek Flatwoods, Charus. I believe it's Charus and Flowers.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm Ryan Kelly, Senior Environmental Specialist with the ACF program. And I'm not sure if it's Charus or Strauss. The realtor told me Strauss, but if anybody. Strauss, okay. Try to remember that. Okay, so the Strauss and Flowers property is in the Alachua Creek Flatwoods project area, or we've at least lumped it with that. The Alachua Creek Flatwoods scored a 7.87 out of 9.44, and this property scored a 6.47 out of 10. It's one parcel, 154 acres in size. It's under one ownership. That's a family ownership. Strauss and Flowers are all part of the same family, as I understand it. No buildings on site, so the just and total value, according to the property appraiser, are the same at $156,600, or just under $1,017 per acre. They do have an asking price of $475,000, and it was nominated as a fee simple acquisition. So here's the Strauss property in red on the Alachua Putnam County line north of Hawthorne. like I said, it's not actually in the ACF project area for Alachua Creek, but it's within about a mile. The project area follows the outline of Little Orange Creek Preserve here. So it's within a mile to the north and east of Little Orange Creek Preserve as well. Over 90% of the property is in the Little Orange Creek strategic ecosystem. And the headwaters of Little Orange Creek, at least one of the tributaries for them, does start right inside the property. So this is an important piece for the headwaters of Little Orange Creek. Looking at some of the surrounding parcels, so just to the west of this property is the Waldron Farms property, which was actually nominated early last year by a neighbor. We had trouble confirming with the owners if they actually did or didn't want to go through with the evaluation process. So we did not move forward with that, but we have recently regained contact with that realtor. So there may be some movement on that in the near future, but that just happens to be right next to the Strauss property. To the west of that area is on the active acquisition list with some Weyerhaeuser property. Both of these are Weyerhaeuser tracts, along with this one that is not showing up on the active acquisition list. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I'm not sure why these two tracts would have been, but not this one. But that's what our layers are showing. And then of course, Little Orange Creek Preserve down here to the south. So there's some potential stuff sort of in the works here to connect it to Little Orange Creek. Looking on the Putnam County side, there are a mix of undeveloped larger lots and some smaller residential lots along that South Bull Pond and Lake Winot. Moving farther east and northeast into Putnam County, Ordway Switzer Biological Station is about 2 miles to the northeast, and there's a large wetland system about 2 miles east. That's all state-owned sovereign submerged land. So there are some other things kind of going out into Putnam County. And all of that, most of that is zoned as agriculture in Putnam County. Really quickly looking at the soils map, it ranges from moderately well-drained soil to very poorly drained soil and open water down in the southeast corner. That pond there is at least referred to on one map I saw as Clearwater Lake. Looking at the natural communities, there's actually a fair number of natural communities for this 154 acres. So I figured I'd just list them out here so you can see, and I have this on a map coming up. Flatwoods Lake ranking the highest as excellent, and then several in the good to fair category. Most of that is related to tree cover, be it cypress in the wetlands or pine in the uplands, having been experienced various degrees of logging and or wildfire. So we can go to the next. So here's an aerial map of the property with some of those natural communities kind of scattered around them. So there's this is Southeast 245th Street, which bisects the parcel. So this northwest tract in the northern part of it is mostly wetlands with a little bit of uplands tucked in up here. And then this big wetland system kind of going across this central part of the property, a couple more wetlands down here in the southern part. And then this band of mesic and wet flatwoods through the middle with some more uplands on the northeast and southwest corners. So we'll start diving into those. I'll also note that about 60% of the property shows up on our wetland layers as being wetlands. So 60-40, I think that's a little bit strongly weighted towards wetlands after we were out there, but for the sake of the development review, that's what we had, 60-40 wetlands uplands. These are a couple of photos of Southeast 245th Street. You can see off to the left on this photo is some of the clear cut in the flatwoods, and this photo on the right is looking north into some of the floodplain swamp. It's a fairly narrow road, but it is a public road as far as we can understand, graded road. Into the natural communities, Basin Swamp and Basin Marsh. So this photo on the left is that larger wetland system near the northern part of the property. You can see much more open out in the middle, some areas of open water, but marshy habitat. And then the edges are where you find the trees, the cypress. This photo on the right is from that south central wetland system. And this picture doesn't necessarily represent it, but it was similar. Out in the middle was more open, grassy, marshy habitat with edges of trees. Both of these wetlands appear to have been impacted by a wildfire at some point. There are a number of dead cypress in the swamp, but plenty of live ones as well. Out in the open grassy areas, there's a mix of grasses, rushes, bidens. There's some spatter dock and water lilies in the open water areas. And cypress was the dominant tree where there were trees. Dome swamp, we didn't get a great picture of the dome swamps, but this, I don't know why this is showing up so grainy, but in the background of this photo, there's a dome swamp that has had some impacts from logging. When they logged the uplands in 2017, they expanded out into some of the cypress as well. So there's sort of this corridor going right through this swamp system, and it skirts this dome swamp out in the back. But there were two other small dome swamps along the northern boundary on that western piece of the property. Seems to be in good condition other than the logging, so that got the good to fair rating. Mostly cypress and some tupelo. On the right is a floodplain swamp, which had a good mix. It didn't seem to have any of the impacts of fire or logging, so it had a good mix of slash pine, cypress, tupelo, dahoon holly, box elder, sweet bay, betterbush in the understory. And this is where the Blackwater stream originates in this floodplain swamp, and then connects into what becomes Little Orange Creek. The wetland system on the east side of the road goes through this culvert under Southeast 254th, 45th Street, and then through this floodplain swamp to the west. Down in the southeast corner is this Flatwoods Lake. The whole lake is about 12 acres in size. Most of that is on the parcel to the south and then into Putnam County to the east. But a little over an acre of this lake does come onto the Shroud's property. It appears to be in excellent condition. You can see open water out in the middle and some marshy habitat along the edges. So again, big wetland band here, couple wetlands here, and that lake down to the south. So moving into the uplands here, especially starting with these Music Flatwoods, this band here, we can go to the next slide. So most of this was logged in 2017, possibly after the wildfire. We saw char marks on a lot of the trees out there. I was not able to hear back from the realtor in time to understand any more about that, but it appears that this took place in 2017. This photo is on the west side of 245th Street. This is the east side. All of the elements of the understory of Flatwoods are there: bunch grasses, saw palmetto, gallberry, tiny blueberry, highbush blueberry. A lot of carpentiferous was out there. Didn't really see much wiregrass, but again, you know, most of the canopy of pine was removed. There are some laurel oaks and sweet gums starting to invade. There was a patch near the southern boundary that, for whatever reason, did not get logged and has a bit thicker of an understory there. I'm not sure why that didn't get logged. And not photographed here, some of those flatwoods as they transition down into some of the wetter areas are wet flatwoods with similar species makeup. Maybe less palmetto, more large gallberry. Okay, scrubby flatwoods up in the northeast corner. Basically just a thick mid-story of saw palmetto and staggerbush. You can see Mike making his way through this. It did open up to the rest of the northeast corner. Seemed to be some much nicer intact Music Flatwoods with some pines still left. That area seemed to be kind of just out of reach from the logging operation, I assume. So scrubby flatwoods made it in the mix as well. And then in the southwest corner, xeric hammock. So this was a more closed hardwood canopy. Hardwoods included live oak, sand live oak, laurel oak, and occasionally I think we saw 2 or 3 longleaf on our walk out there. Several turkey oaks and several sand pines. Some areas there were some areas that were a little more open. I think in the background of this photo, there's a little bit more open area, some kind of suppressed wiregrass on the top of this burrow. But there were active gopher tortoise burrows in this area. There's possibly some of this xeric hammock along the northern boundary of the property as well, but we didn't really get a deep dive into that part of the property. Given the historic aerials and some of the species here, it's very possible and maybe even likely that this one time was sandhill and it just succeeded into xeric hammock over the decades. You can't really tell, I'm assuming in this photo, but there's a bit of like an old road or plow line here that kind of meandered through this whole thing, maybe historic ATV dirt bike paths, but it does not look like that's been being used for that in quite some time. Overall, human impacts on the site were, for as far as dumping, were relatively light. There was some areas of some standard household trash, tires, wheelbarrow, some hunting equipment. With the exception of on the north boundary, there was a few piles of more substantial dumping, some lumber, pile of gutters, electrical equipment, this boat, a chest freezer, so that the more heavy dumping was concentrated to one area. We did also notice several deer skulls in the floodplain swamp along the road, so likely this being a rural road, people maybe are dumping animal carcasses. So that may be something that would have to be considered with this property. And then other impacts would include the logging roads and that old plow line through the Xerochamic. There are no known archaeological sites on the property, but we did find fragments of Purdy pot, so that tells you a little bit about the former land use on this site. And I'll leave the map up here, but invasive plants were few and far between. We did find camphor and chinaberry in small individual numbers. We found some Caesarweed along one of the roads and climbing fern along 245th Street. This was evaluated a week and a half or so after that really hard freeze before Christmas. So I think we were not seeing all of the climbing fern and Caesarweed that might actually be out there, but what we saw was relatively low density. There was also signs of hog damage and a dead hog on the western part. So there's a little bit of hog activity out there, not terrible. Again, we found numerous gopher tortoise burrows in the Xerochamic and one or two up here. This is where that trash pile was. We saw white-tailed deer, great blue heron, great egret, red-headed woodpecker, red-shouldered hawk, and Mike and I both intimately found a yellow jacket nest. It wasn't that. A neighbor who was here, who provided some extra documentation for the nomination, has reported that fox squirrels, black bears, sandhill cranes, bald eagles, and lots of other wildlife are frequently seen in this area. We did not see any of that on our evaluation, but the habitat certainly seemed suitable for those species. And there is an FWC documented bald eagle site just shy of 2 miles to the east of here. And I can take any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Thorough job as always. Appreciate it. Before we get to the Q&A by board members, we have quite a few members of the public here. I'd like to open the floor for any offerings or questions by the public.
Well, I'd be happy to just introduce myself. I'm John Hendricks. I'm a passive Frenchman.
Hi.
I'm here, we're in the neighborhood and also in capacity of being a volunteer consultant with PLC occasionally on some of their project work. And so they asked me if I would be interested in participating in developing their application. So I did write a letter regarding characteristics of the site, which I certainly compliment your own staff. They did a very nice job. And we just generally support the protection of what we've come to know as a fairly rich wildlife area, in particular out there, and attribute a lot of that to the connection of the Ordway Preserve to the Little Orange Creek down basin area, not too far away. This is the two lakes, Lake Wenat and Bull Pond, associated with this parcel, and in combination, they represent a very significant node at the center between Ordway and Little Orange Creek. So that may have something to do with why we've seen so much wildlife in the area over the years. Patsy bought our Pecan Grove Farm on the north side of Lake Lamont in 79. So we've had a good long period of time of experiencing migrations of bird life, of heavy, in the past, particularly heavy sandhill crane use of the marsh between the lakes, and fox squirrel use in and out all around these properties, and a number of other fairly dramatic wildlife events. I did prepare a somewhat involved review when the Florida Power and Light solar project was put in place just to the north. I drew on some of that information in my letter, but we have enough knowledge of the local families who are surrounding this Shiraz parcel to have the hope that in the future this piece might act as a central core for the addition of surrounding areas, the Moore property, the Pritchett property, and well, the Waters Ranch potentially as a conservation easement in the future. There could end up being a fairly significant area of protection to look for in the future, let's say. And it certainly would fit into the Large Creek project, especially if that Waldron Farms area could eventually link it all up really well. So that's the purpose of me coming to answer questions, support PLC and what they're doing with this application, and just to compliment the staff report. I was very impressed with that. I would further introduce myself as a person who originally worked for Environmental Protection Department in the early 80s, mid 80s. And I had a lot to do with the first inventory work that was undertaken to identify significant uplands, which turned into strategic ecosystems and on to this amazing program that we have going. So I go back far, and I'm excited that this is finding its way up into our area. I know that there are higher value areas all around the margins of this county, but in this particular area of Wenat and Bull Pond, I think there's some pretty nice resources that could potentially become part of the program. So,
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Willie?
Yeah, I'm Willie Pelosi from Putnam Land Conservancy. I just wanted to thank you all for considering the project. We submitted the application and to answer any questions. I'm extremely grateful to John and Patty for what they've done to the project, and their knowledge is invaluable. The application, so I'm here to answer any questions if need be.
All right, thank you. If any of you have not already done so, if you would, before you leave this evening, sign the dependent sheet, if you would, for our records.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, let's start clockwise. Jason.
Right now, this piece is going to be an isolated piece if we were just to acquire it. It's, I wasn't even aware of the Richard Moore piece. I'm not sure what that is. Is it a
It's a
conservation?
conservation easement and mitigation bank.
So I would like to understand, one, the Waldron Farms, assuming that they're going to come forward with an agriculture easement, or would it be a conservation easement? Are they going to continue to keep trying to keep it in agriculture or what, so I don't know the nature of that. Warehouser is warehouser, that could happen immediately or whatever they decide to do. So in my mind, I'm wondering what sort of connection is this envisioned going any further than just sort of the surrounding pieces, long term, and that includes Putnam County also. Because at this point, it does not seem like something I would buy, given the properties that have been nominated to this point. So that's where I'm at with that. So I would definitely entertain Willie or whoever, if you guys wanted to give an idea of what your vision is. Because right now I see scattered residential to the east, once you get past the lakefront, and to the north and to the south, because they're not showing any more of the parcels other than directly around it, but it gets complicated pretty quick to get to what was it, Ordway?
Can I address some of that comment?
Please, yes.
Well, you're right, there is a lot of residential, certainly those lakes. And it's not ideal, in that respect. I know that Waldron Farms has been up for sale, that part out there has been up for sale more than once in the last 30 years. And they've been under some enforcement with, NRCS and other agencies with some of their intensive row crop farming activity, and so they've had a checkered past of how they work with that property. I think they would like to get rid of it at this point, but whether that's feasible way beyond me, I don't know. I know there's a realtor sign up at the moment. Weyerhaeuser is just recently logged, cut their piece, and they've been outside prepping, bedding, and replanting. A few weeks, but I think I don't see a perfect uninterrupted project as far as natural area connection to the south or to the northeast, but that's a question that might prove in the future to be more realistic, when some of the other properties are resolved one way or another. It always showed up in our inventory projects as sort of a pocket of resource area. It's partly in Alachua, partly in Putnam, and it never gained a whole lot of attention along with the other big projects that we could find along the Santa Fe River around the south part of the county. But in some respects, this creek system is a little bit, other than the Lochloosa Creek and Rocky Creek, there just aren't very many creek systems originating in Alachua County that drain out. They're not internally drained systems, so it's somewhat of an unusual hydrologic characteristic that this Little Orange Creek represents.
Could you help me understand just sort of directionality of the creeks?
Well,
Understand it well.
I know it all is flowing south here through Little Orange Creek Preserve into Little Orange Lake. And
So the wetlands on that property flow through the creek too.
yeah, the lakes here into the wetlands, all moving west through the Strauss property, through the Waldron Farms, and then south.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, can I,
Yes, please.
is it possible to back up to the previous one? So I'm not an ecologist, but I think John, when I was speaking to him about this in some of our conversations, he made a good point to me that even as a standalone project, this has some excellent representations of different natural communities that would be great as a standalone project. But it's not a standalone project. I mean, just because it may not touch other conservation lands, it is still an important piece in a puzzle that wildlife can get a short distance. I mean, Little Orange Creek Nature Park, or the portion owned by Alachua Conservation Trust, it's a very short distance there, maybe. Yeah, it is. And there are some interested property owners in here. These owners have, right here, they have 20 acres. They're considering the conservation easement. They never want it developed. This is timberland. It could be potential. So does it, I don't know, maybe a question to you all, but in my mind, I don't think it has to touch because it's not going to be severed by major roads or anything to prevent wildlife movement. And then this is a part of a bigger system that's, again, a stopover for birds and other animals that are migrating that can seek refuge in this whole system on their way to Ordway, or from Ordway to Little Orange Creek. And it's not, unfortunately, map doesn't show it, but the state lands that Ryan was talking about, Fowler's Prairie or Aquila Prairie, is probably within a mile of here. Did you say?
Levy Prairie.
Yeah, Levy Prairie. So, and that's a few thousand acres. And that's just within a half mile or a mile of Ordway. So, it does serve an important service, for wildlife, even though it may not directly connect in what John was saying about the creek system. That's really valuable to protect those headwaters.
The fox pen and in the slough is not too far south from there.
Yeah, that's, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 miles south.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right,
So, yeah.
thank you, Willie. Anyone else?
I'll just mention, as I've spoken with Waldron Farm family, if they're not able or they don't sell it fee simple to somebody, if we were able to do an easement on the property, they would want to continue to farm the land. Their intention would be more of an agricultural easement.
Okay.
And I think it's probably a good idea right at this point to remind the board of your first action that you have available to you, which is either to place the property in the eligibility pool or not. And the guidance given is your choices: properties eligible for further consideration for public acquisition by Alachua County, or properties not eligible for further consideration for public acquisition by Alachua County. So it's really, the first decision is really about eligibility of the second decision is about priority of the property. So that's probably important to think about as we continue with comments.
Thank you. Bruce.
No questions, good presentation.
Melissa.
Thank you. Good presentation. Thanks for coming and speaking to this project. Really great. I just have some general comments to the project as a whole, thinking about our first chart, which is contemplating water resources. Protecting the headwaters of Little Orange Creek is very important. Intact wetlands are hard to come by, and these seem to be in pretty good shape. And just as something that I've been thinking about during this presentation of trying to conceptualize the size of the property and the wetlands on it. Sweetwater Wetlands Park is 125 acres. This is 154. Obviously, they're not engineered wetlands to treat so many pounds of nitrogen or phosphorus a day, but they still provide a really beneficial resource to our water supply. And also, regardless of direct adjacent connectivity from a parcel concept, wetlands provide really important stops for flyover species, for birds. And I think that ticks the box for water and wildlife, which are our first 2 charges.
Thank you. Hey.
Just echoing the importance of the wetlands to wildlife and the fact that means there's very low development chance. And it's in an area of really important systems. So, yeah, okay, it's not directly next door, but it's right there. Creek systems and important properties. I got really excited about the wetlands system specifically.
All right. Paul,
I am in love with that area in there because it's got white sand in the dry parts and it's got these wet areas right adjacent to each other. We've got some property over at Star Lake, which is just kind of southeast of there. And side by side are growing sand live oaks and loblolly bays. It's like, how can this possibly happen? You dig down through 3 feet of white sand, just like deep sand, and you hit water. It's that whole section is a unique landform. I don't know exactly why. So I'm much in love with that project, with this whole area. If you back up one slide there, one more. You had a picture of the land there with the lumber pile on it.
Oh, yeah, that's towards the bottom.
I wanted to make a hypothesis as to what that is, because I saw some land recently nearby, and it had been all longleaf pines that had been cat-faced up to maybe 10 feet high. And when they logged off the pines, maybe 20 years, 30 years ago, they left those cat faces in a big pile because I guess they've got metal in them and nails and stuff, so they couldn't turn that into lumber. So I would suggest that that's the remnants of some longleaf pines that were probably 100 years old when they got cut.
It could be.
Hardwood.
There were multiple, I think at least 1 or 2 other piles, and at least one of them was definitely dimensional lumber, but this definitely does not look as dimensional, so that's possible.
Mhm.
all right.
Could you go back to the map? The shows the different parcels around it. Yes. So the Waldron Farms, is it subdivided at the south?
Yeah, like all these.
Yeah.
Yes, there are, I assume, plotted roads between all of these, but each of these little subplots is part of Waldron Farms.
Okay.
There may be a couple, I think like there's a little one and there's a little one that are not, but I don't know the
So
history.
it's subdivided for
It was an old plat.
development,
Oh,
old
yeah.
plat, so,
Yeah.
okay. And on the summary, the parcel has approximately 93 acres of wetlands and 112 acres of associated buffer, which leaves approximately 30 acres for local land. That doesn't, can you help me understand that math? Because it's 154 acre property. So is it the buffers plus the wetlands is 112?
Yes, the
Okay.
buffer plus the wetlands, yes.
Okay. And the developable property is the zero area. The
Yes,
south
that
and
would,
north.
and again, the wetland layer map, I didn't put a wetland map on here, but
Mhm.
the layers for our wetlands are grossly overestimating how much is wetland, so.
Okay.
In reality, that number would get trimmed down should somebody try to develop that and they actually got the wetlands delineated.
Okay.
But yeah, that it would most likely be this xeric corner here and possibly, I didn't do the math between these buffers, there may be a strip through the flatwoods, but I don't know.
And then the culvert that runs under the, was it 240?
45th, I
something?
think.
Yeah. So does that influence the creation of the creek? Is it, is all the waters funneled into that culvert?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I mean, certainly anything coming from the east side of the road to get across the road has to funnel
Okay.
through here, but it does fan back out into this floodplain swamp on the west side of the road. And immediately next to the road, there is not a defined channel.
Okay.
I think that channel still forms later to the west.
Okay. Probably Waldron Farms is where it forms.
Yeah, I mean, we did not make it all the way to the western corner of this property, but there certainly seems to be the start of it, and Unfortunately, some of that start might be channelized from where they punch through to log here. There definitely seemed to be a lower, straighter portion of water, so.
Well, I think it's a great property. I love headwaters and I love sand. Yeah, the connection, development potential is kind of low. That's the only thing that's standing out to me, but I think it's definitely eligible.
Thank you. I don't have too much to add. I definitely would like to see nominations of the potentially willing participants in this program, specifically the properties immediately to the south. And if Putnam Land Conservancy has any negotiations or discussions with the Pritchett family, I think that would tie it together nicely. But I think the hydrological connections and this serving as the headwaters is certainly enough for my vote. So before I call for any votes, any other offerings or questions from the public?
I would love to see a really zoomed out map of this area. Maybe not, today, but eventually, because when we talk about this area, Putnam County kind of has, there's an influence and they might not be all connected, but there's a lot of conservation land, right, in the area.
Not much that I was able to see. There are some large
Flowers.
plots of undeveloped areas, but it is definitely mixed with residential and smaller parcels mixed in, so.
Yeah, so I could see the idea of the
Actually,
corridor.
The last slide is the Putnam County. So
There you go.
I think there, yeah, yep, here, so Ordway is not showing up on this map, but basically this is Ordway.
Is it Purple Flowers Prairie? Is it that small?
Yep.
Okay, that was like.
Pretty
No,
close.
this purple is that solar farm.
Oh,
So that other wetland system is here-ish, I believe. It's about 2 miles east of the county line.
speaking of that, you didn't happen to see any pitcher plants on this property, did you?
Did not. We did see some news.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
So the only question I have before you gave it to the final is, so this property is the headwaters of Little Orange Creek.
Part of the headwaters. Yeah.
It's the primary headwaters of Little Orange Creek.
I can't say what those other tributaries, if they are more primary, but
I'm just curious because that's what we're calling it. So I just want to make sure that
It is.
I'm all for. Okay. The primary headwaters for Little Orange Creek. Okay,
There are about 3 or 4 intermittent water courses that work their way down into that general area. But this is the only one that is essentially a perennial connection. It's draining the largest area of that basin that exists up there.
Could you tell us again what the asking price for this land on?
475,000, I believe.
Any other questions? Hear any nominations? Motions, excuse me.
I'll make a motion to put this on the eligibility pool.
Second,
All those in favor of placing the Alachua Creek Flatwoods, Charouse and Flowers property on the eligibility pool? All those in favor say aye.
aye,
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
I make a motion to put it on the priority pool.
Second.
Motion to place the Alachua Creek Flatwoods, Charouse and Flowers property on the priority pool. All those in favor say aye.
you can give time for discussion on the motion.
Sure, yes, sorry.
I still don't think it's worth it based on the fact that it's still a disjunct property based on what we know now. So, regardless of its status as the primary headwaters of Little Orange Creek, I still think it's a little premature to move forward with it on the priority pool.
Okay,
I mean, go and talk wise.
well, we have a motion and a second. Unless there's any other additional comments or questions, we can vote on the standing motion. Yes,
I'll make a comment that, I think the acreage in itself for the wetlands that are on it is significant for water quality, for bird species, for folks that fly as well as walk to get there. And I think it's a strong project.
I think the price is certainly reasonable for the location and price of other lands around.
Who did the motion and second on the priority pool? They did the same on the eligibility pool?
I said Bruce Beavers.
I didn't, that was, Kate that did the
Priority,
second.
yeah.
Oh, that was Kate.
No, sorry, on the motion to move to the eligibility pool, I heard Bruce and Kate that's for the second. And then I seconded for priority.
So we're gonna call it. Bruce.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Motion is passed with Jason as our no vote. Very good. Thank you. All right. We are moving on to. I guess we have nothing under new business, so we move to staff updates, acquisition updates, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Bird, Conservation Land Negotiator. And we'll start the acquisition updates with the Brooks property, which actually closed December 9th. So that was our latest acquisition since the last meeting. It was just a 2.5 acre parcel, but it wasn't in holding in the Lake Alto Preserve area. So small but mighty addition. And moving on, we have the Santa Fe River Bell project, which is slated to close next week, January 31st. Staff's been out there a lot during due diligence, and it's a really cool property where you see the swamp turn into the Santa Fe swamp turn into the Santa Fe River. You can actually see it on the property. So exciting project.
I may have, so it'll be a simultaneous closing with ACT acquiring the property on the north side of the river.
Correct. So the yellow outline there is in Bradford County, and ACT will be purchasing that.
Very good.
So heading west on the river, this is the Santa Fe River Matthews property. It's in due diligence, and we're wrapping that up now and projecting to close in mid-February. The Santa Fe Waldo Tree Farm. This is also kind of in the Santa Fe headwaters area. It's just to the east of 301. So actually, like the Bell property is kind of right here on the other side of, on the west side of 301. Kevin and I were out there last week and saw a tremendous amount of birds. Really cool property as well. That's where we're underway with ESA and survey, moving through due diligence. Lake Santa Fe Din properties. This is also a collaborative effort with ACT. So there's 2 larger lakefront parcels, which the county is pursuing, and then 3 smaller roadside parcels here, which ACT is pursuing, and it's going to be similar. It's a simultaneous closing, or will be, we signed an LOI with the landowners in December. And the contract is under review and hopefully will be presented to the property owner soon. And just to note, this is actually Lake Alto, despite the project area saying Lake Santa Fe, it's Lake Alto, and the Paget property is just to the north of it, so it actually connect to that portion of the Lake Alto Preserve. And the next project, Mill Creek, the Rembert Farms, this is a conservation easement of about 700 acres. Here in the red area. And we are moving forward with appraisals. Those will start in early February. So a great addition to the Mill Creek system, just north of Alachua. And those are our most active projects. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Got one nerdy question.
Yeah.
On the Lake Alto Din property. I remember we had a sovereign submerged lands determination letter from Bureau of Survey and Mapping. Just curious, we don't, obviously, if we don't have a contract, we don't have a survey of the property yet, right?
No, we don't.
All right, so there's your heads up, make sure your surveyor has that elevation so you can project it. So you know what you're buying. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, that moves us on to our celebratory wild spaces, public places funding update.
Just real quick, did we move old business?
Yes, we moved 8A, excuse me, 6A is now 8D.
Actually, just 8E is fine.
Okay,
Get at it.
okay. 8E,
Well, just the last in 8.
Okay.
Right, I'm gonna try and stand on this side so that.
you don't get blinded.
Also, I guess those folks have left, and so standing there doesn't really impede their view, but it might affect yours. All right, so as you all probably are aware, the voting citizens of Alachua County did pass the Wild Spaces and Public Places surtax on
Yay.
November 8th. So that, just as a reminder, is a full cent local infrastructure surtax, repealing the last 2 years of the 2016 half-cent Wild Spaces surtax. So it's basically ended the previous funding cycle 2 years early and started a new 10-year funding cycle with a half-cent still dedicated to wild spaces and public places projects, which means projects that either provide mostly park-based recreational site improvements, potentially park acquisitions, and as we all know it, provide the funds for the land conservation efforts that are known as the Alachua County Forever Program. So the land acquisition projects that we work on and that we talk about, and then additionally provide funding support for some initial stewardship of those acquired lands. So we're now in a 10-year cycle where we still have a half-cent of local infrastructure surtax dedicated to the wild spaces and public places projects. The other half-cent of that full cent surtax is going to other types of local infrastructure projects, road improvements. A percentage is allocated for low-income housing, essentially, and the municipalities are also receiving some of the more traditional surtax funds to do surtax improvements of their selection. So what I'm presenting to you today is a draft of the presentation that I will be giving to the Board of County Commissioners on February 7th at their special meeting. And the purpose of that special meeting is for them to hear the Parks Master Plan, which has just been completed through a consultant and with public input. And then simultaneously at that meeting, not at the exact same moment, I will be giving a 10-year basically strategy plan update to the board for the conservation lands program intent for utilization of those surtax funds. At that meeting, it's extremely likely that the board will make a decision about the funding split of those wild spaces surtax funds, because that has still not yet been decided. In the previous funding cycle, the funding split was 90% conservation lands, 10% what's called active parks, and it did not allocate any of that active park funding towards acquisition of potential future parks. And so that decision is the decision that's not yet been made for this funding cycle with the wild spaces surtax. So I'm just giving you all an opportunity to see, again, draft, not quite finalized presentation, provide comments, ask questions. And of course, that meeting is open to public attendance, as all commission meetings are. It's at 1:30 on February 7th.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Are you in this presentation, are you also going to show us the 10-year future plan? Is that part of this?
The master plan for
Yeah.
parks?
No, the future acquisition. I forgot exactly. what
It's
you
the
called it.
strategy. Yeah, so we obviously, as a willing seller program, we can only work with the properties that come to us through nomination. And then if not nominated by the landowner, we have to have a willing seller also that's interested in participating. So we can't at this moment say we will buy XYZ properties, because we may not.
I'll
have-
just, or is there slides that are, you're going to, on this, that are pertaining to that portion?
Yes,
Okay, then I'll just wait.
okay. All right, if you would. So this slide is really included in the presentation for citizen edification if needed, which is just to make folks aware that what we are talking about are two different county government departments that have both a mission of serving the public, but in different capacities. The Environmental Protection Department is where the Alachua County Forever program is housed, and that's where the management of the county nature preserves occurs. That department reports to the county manager through our director, Steve Hofstetter. The Parks and Open Space Department actually falls under Community Administrative Services, and they have a director position that is filled by Jason Maurer, and he reports to the Assistant County Manager and Chief of Staff, Gina Peebles. Both provide public recreational opportunities, both provide public services in different capacities. The nature preserves provide passive recreation that's resource-based or more integrated into existing ecosystems. And the active parks provide more developed recreation, think of ball fields, playgrounds, sites that have a significantly higher degree of public use infrastructure within the site, and a lower degree of natural habitat or natural features. Though there are a few exceptions, like Post Springs, which is a park, but has natural features. With you all, I'm not going to go into our mission. You all hopefully know it quite well, but again, it is focused on environmentally significant lands, water resources, wildlife habitat, and resource-based recreation. We have previously, in 3 different meetings with the board, provided updates and a 3 to 5 year and eventually 5-year plan to the board of what our intent was to utilize the continued funding from the surtax. We're now intending to provide a 10-year strategy or plan. It's going to focus on acquisition targets, infrastructure needs, the potential needs for future positions and equipment as the managed land base continues to expand, and the potential growth associated with an agriculture protection program, which could be a new component of the land acquisition strategy that's being utilized by the county. Going back to the basics, the Alachua County Forever project areas are ones that you all, at least all the LCB members, have seen multiple times. They are the areas that were at the program inception identified as the best of what was left to protect within the county. The darker green areas received the higher priority rating. The yellow and then going to red or orange red areas are the ones that received a lower priority rating in terms of resource quality, connectivity, and some of the other program missions. Within these project areas, that's actually wrong. So that's an edit I need to make. There's still 156,000 acres unacquired within the ACF project areas. So there's still a lot of work that could be done if our focus was the ACF project areas strictly. Recapping what has been done in the most recent funding cycle, which is 2016 through December of 2022. So that cycle just ended when it was repealed to allow the new surtax to begin January 1st of 2023. We've acquired a range of different properties that go from 1 acre in size to 4,000 acre in size. 4 of them were donations. The total number of acquisitions, go ahead, is 27 acquisitions, 13,000 acres approximately. The land cost for those acquisitions was $39 million, almost 40 million. For the lands that were acquired, the due diligence cost for all of those lands is $1.7 million. And additionally, because the properties that we are working on, that you hear about the updates that we're going to closing on, those are the ones that are most active in our process at that moment, at that snapshot in time. However, simultaneous to that, we are working on multiple other properties in the earlier stages of pursuit. So for properties that are in progress, not acquired, in that funding cycle, we also spent about $300,000. So the total funding expenditure from 2016 to the end of 2022, $41.8 million. That gives an average acquisition cost, if you look at it as the cost of doing business. So it is the land, the due diligence, and the properties that we're working on at the same time, $3,177 per acre. We didn't go back to program inception because property values have shifted, and additionally, the due diligence costs have shifted so dramatically recently that we felt it was better to just look at the more recent snapshot. What that translates to in terms of where those acquisitions are, they're the red colored acquisitions. So you've seen this map in a few different iterations. The lighter green are partner conservation lands. Those include easements and fee simple lands. All the brighter, darker green are ACF acquisitions. So total ACF acres acquired is approaching 33,000 acres. And the properties acquired in this 2016 to 22 funding cycle are the ones that are shown in red. You can see that the focus has been largely on the east side of the county. Additionally, there have been multiple acquisitions on the Santa Fe River and a few down in the Watermelon Pond area. But in general, fewer acquisitions on the west side of the county due to both opportunity and program focus and priority. Yes.
And just for curiosity, is there any significant number of acreage acquired that was within the ACF timeframe, but not the ACF ones?
Like partner acquisitions or
Anything that happened that didn't really, that was sort of ancillary to the program.
so partner acquisitions?
Sure. Something we didn't spend money on that was acquired. So yes.
Or donations?
I mean, I'm just curious what like if there's anything that's not that happened while the program was happening that wasn't in
You
red.
would go back to the second blue page.
You don't have to go. I was
So the properties that we did receive donations during this project period were valued at approximately $2.2 million.
But did the district find anything during the window that we didn't take part in at all, and they just came in and purchased it?
Almost certainly,
Okay, I was just curious.
but I can't tell you
No,
for
I
sure
just-
what they are. But yes, I mean, ACT obviously has bought some things. probably, that's a less of a yes on the state parks side, although, there have been other partnerships that have occurred.
You
So-
can keep moving forward. I just.
Okay.
I was curious.
Melissa?
If you go back a slide to that average number, is that calculating in kind of the value subtracted from those donations?
So this includes, we do pay for due diligence on those donations, so it includes the cost of doing business.
Right.
That's receiving donations and buying land for those acres, under the assumption that going forward, there would be a similar mix potential. So the intent of this is really to use this number going forward. And so that for that reason, the donations were not valued out, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't want to, obviously, you're trying to present high level relevant to your message. So if it is an interesting number to say to also highlight the donated value here as well. So that, this program has inspired that as a value added number.
Yeah, I can take a look at that and consider how that might fit.
I don't think it's, it's not critical, but it's a good data point.
We have a couple slides that you're not going to see that are kind of like the extras that I'm still contemplating. And one of them is a grant funding slide that the donations could be potentially a good match with. However, the purpose of this presentation is to get to a destination
Absolutely.
that may or may not work with. So
The other thing to consider, is that number includes conservation easements, so the price per acre
is different.
is much
Yeah.
less than decent.
Yeah. So we did calculate out the value of the conservation easements. It's approximately $1,000 less per acre. But in the end, because we anticipate a mix of all of these things going forward, we kept them lumped together. Emily, if you would get us back to where we were. Oh, okay. Next. So the big picture for the wild spaces and public places surtax programs going forward, the projected total revenue for the 10-year cycle of surtax collection is $194 million. So that is not for the 1 cent, that's the half cent, that is the wild spaces portion. For that, $6 million off the top is being allocated to the municipalities for their wild spaces projects, which generally mean active park improvements, though they are not restricted to that use. That's $3 million for the city of Gainesville and $3 million to be divided amongst the other municipalities. What is not yet decided is the percentage allocation of that wild spaces funding that remains after that off the top portion for the conservation lands 10-year plan and the parks master plan. Within the conservation lands 10-year plan, the primary targets are conservation land acquisition. That's the origin of our program. That's the will of the citizens. And in the beginning was the Alachua County Forever Bond with a goal of acquiring and protecting conservation land starting in the year 2000. For that, we anticipate continued acquisition of the more traditional types of conservation lands that our program has purchased previously, and the addition of conservation easements purchased through an agriculture protection program that has not yet been developed, but will be developed as a component of this next 10-year plan. Additionally, we will be looking to the wild spaces funding to support infrastructure development on the preserves or the acquired conservation lands. And within that, as a subset, a field support facility with an office for our staff so that our staff and equipment can be united in the same location to provide maximum efficiency for our management and stewardship of these conservation lands going forward, which is not currently the circumstance that we are in. We are also looking at a component for preserve maintenance. Similarly, Parks in their master plan has identified needs for active park improvements. Those are the existing parks that you already know of within the county, parks and boat ramp parks. New park acquisition in areas that have been identified as underserved through the master plan process, and active park operation and maintenance. So very similar targets between the two programs. Yes.
So I'm envisioning potentially 2 additional advisory boards. One for the county parks and one for the agricultural component. On the conservation land acquisition component. Are you going to be making any recommendations or speaking to that? I've already been contacted by a number of people who have expressed interest specifically on the ag land preservation program. What can you tell me?
We have met with the parks, the assistant county manager and the parks director about their master plan and their intent for process regarding park acquisition. Currently, the intent that they expressed, which I'm sure they will clarify in their presentation to the board, is to utilize the county's more traditional acquisition process, not the Alachua County Forever acquisition process, but rather working through the Public Works Department, the county surveyor, if we're have a person filling that position at that time, and going, that route for specific active parks. If there are properties that are identified that look to be hybrid properties that have a developed and impacted footprint that would be more suited for an active park, but which are also including acreage that is conservation land acreage. In that scenario, those properties might be run through the Alachua County Forever process. And we have not discussed a separate advisory board for the parks component of that, because that is at least at this point anticipated to be an infrequent component. In that scenario, the parks funding would pay for the footprint associated with the active park, and the conservation land funding would pay for the footprint associated with the conservation lands. That's about as far as that discussion has gone. With regards to the agriculture protection program, that I do have a slide that's going to address that, and so I might just save my comments, but it does involve development of a second advisory board for that
The
process.
county does have the Recreation Open Space Committee, Roscoe, which is the Parks Committee.
Mhm.
There's currently a master plan of sorts.
For parks.
Yes.
There is an older master plan.
Did that go through Roscoe? Were they involved in?
I am
developing?
not
You know?
involved in the parks master plan process. So when we're looking at then trying to identify what these funding splits should be to best serve the missions of our respective programs and meet the needs of the citizens and the expectations of the voters, we have looked at what targets exist on a broader spectrum than purely associated with Alachua County to try to identify what those acreage targets might be for acquisition. A fairly well-known target that is has been promoted by the federal government, but also by other state, national, and global entities is the 30 by 30 target, which the basis of it is protecting 30% of land and water by 2030. It has been identified by the Land Trust Alliance as the minimum commitment needed to protect essential ecosystem services and buffer against the worst impacts of climate change. However, it's now fairly widely accepted that 30% target is inadequate and that perhaps the real target is 50%. And that's a global 50%. That's not necessarily 50% in every place in every geographic area. However, 50% of land and water protection by 2050. Our target is likely to fall somewhere between those percentages. However, regardless of what the percentage is, all the efforts that are focused in this process of conservation land protection must include corridors, wetlands and water resources, imperiled species and sites, diverse habitats, and agricultural land protection. If you would. So what does that mean within Alachua County? Currently on the Alachua County active acquisition list, this is another update that I need to make in this draft. We have over 40,000 acres on the active acquisition list. if we were to target that 30% minimum goal, then at a current protection level of 23% of the county, that means we need to acquire an additional 43,400 acres to hit that 30% mark. At the current land prices that we presented earlier, that's $138 million that will be needed just to hit the minimum target that has been established. The county, through its comprehensive plan process, the 2040 comprehensive plan has identified a critical ecological corridor within the county, which essentially includes protection of the Florida Wildlife Corridor and the portion of the Florida Ecological Greenways Network along the Santa Fe River. Again, those are two of our highest priority corridors as well for the ACF program. To acquire the unacquired portions of that critical ecological corridor that has been established in the comprehensive plan, there's 107,000 acres that would need to be acquired, and that at current prices would reflect about $341 million worth of expenditure. If we expand out to the next level and look purely at the Florida Ecological Greenways Network, then we're looking at the Santa Fe River corridor, the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and a southern corridor that would allow connectivity from Bar Hammock Preserve west and southwest to Goethe State Forest and to conservation lands along the Gulf and further south. To achieve that level of protection, we would need $470 million. So these are the targets that incorporate local needs and local priorities with state and regional needs and the larger global priorities. The challenge for us is looking at the county. Where is there a land that's available that can be efficiently acquired? This map represents the parcelization of the county. The pink areas are individual parcels that have been merged by a same owner. So in the case of all the sort of neon blue outlines, those are Alachua County ownership. In the areas, and it's a little bit outdated, in the areas down in and around Lake Waclusa, a lot of that is timber company ownership or state ownership. And going west, the main message is that the western part of the county is highly, highly parcelized. That makes each individual acquisition a higher cost per purchase, because the same amount of due diligence needs to be done per acquisition, regardless of the size.
You made a comment early on the land, the pink were merged by the same owner?
Yes. So that all the Weyerhaeuser ownership shows up as United, basically, or all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You just all on the pink, not, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is just really to illustrate the challenge that we face and why so many of the conservation land acquisitions by the county and other partners have been placed on the eastern side. It's purely an opportunity driven and a habitat quality and wetland protection driven decision. Color's not good. So for, go down one. Okay, go back one. Okay. For the corridor-based strategy, again, what we have previously presented to the board, and I obviously am going to need to change these colors. This is actually good we're doing this in this room. The Florida Wildlife Corridor is on the eastern side of the county. That represents the bulk of the acreage that remains to be protected. The light green, it's this hard to tell amongst these greens. The light green on the north side of the county is the Santa Fe River corridor. The light green on the south side of the county is the Bar Hammock to Watermelon Pond or southern corridor. All of, and it's this color, all of these areas are part of the Florida Ecological Greenways Network, priority 3 and priority 4. Go ahead. Our strategy to date has been referred to as the green crescent, but in reality, what it is protection of the wetter and wilder portions of the county. And it does translate into protection of more forested land. Go ahead.
Sorry. I'll finish the slide.
Okay. Just keep going, Ashley. Okay. On the west side of the county, we do see there to be a higher percentage opportunity of protection of agricultural lands. However, a agricultural protection program going forward with the goals of strengthening all of these corridors that we've identified and helping to ensure greater likelihood and strength of local food production will not only be focused on acquiring easements on land on the western side of the county, but throughout the entire county in areas where suitable sites have been identified. Go ahead, Melissa.
Just to clarify, the brighter green, that's all FEGN layers 1 through 5 or just 1 through 3 for
3 and 4.
it's showing 3 and 4.
3 and 4.
Okay.
Yeah. While all of this bigger picture planning is underway, we are at the same time continuing to pursue acquisitions. These are the properties that are on the active acquisition list. However, this does not represent all of the properties on the active acquisition list. We have 3 properties that are in the closing phase that we expect to close on, the last of which by mid-March. We have 4 in the negotiations phase and 19 in the pre-negotiations phase, which means they have not yet been appraised, but we do have willing landowners. In total, that represents an additional 13,000 acres and an additional potential $42 million. However, that number is purely speculative because, again, appraisals have not yet been conducted on some of those lands. So what does that mean in terms of the 10-year strategy for Alachua County Forever and the funding that's needed to implement that strategy? As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 possible targets and obviously a range within those targets as well that could be selected for protection within the county. The base minimum for essential protection of 30% of the county by 2030, without accounting for increased land prices, would require $138 million for land acquisition alone. If we were to pursue the goals established in the 2040 comprehensive plan for Alachua County in protection of the critical ecological corridor footprint, that would require $340 million. If we are to go further than that and incorporate agricultural protection and a focused effort to protect the Florida Ecological Greenways Network areas that identify our top 3 corridors, again, the Santa Fe River, the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and the Southern Corridor that connects Bar Hammock to Watermelon Pond, that's potentially taking us up to $470 million at current prices. In addition to the funds needed for land acquisition, the Conservation Lands Program will also require funding for operational costs and preserve stewardship up to 10% of our split of the surtax as defined by the Commission. We foresee that potentially being 5% for term limited staffing that will not continue after the end of the surtax cycle, and will allow for initial stewardship and improvement of these conservation lands, and 5% for the contractual and construction costs associated with other initial improvements on the site. In addition, we anticipate approximately $2.3 million being needed to construct what our program has identified as our #1 operational priority, which is a combined field support and office facility. That site has been identified. We are working with the facilities department to develop the initial architecture and engineering estimates and eventually move forward with that project, but we will be utilizing wild spaces and public places surtax funding, because it is infrastructure surtax funding that qualifies for this use to move that goal forward. Beyond that, we also will be utilizing these funds for infrastructure improvements on the acquired properties to provide the public recreational access that the citizens desire for these natural areas. Finally, we will be working to develop an agricultural protection program within the county that will start first with a survey and plan developed for the county by a consultant or contractor to identify the highest priority areas for agricultural soil protection and operational protection within the county. We anticipate that taking 1 to 2 years to complete. And then additionally, identifying the process, which will include staff or contracting for implementation and the constituting of an additional advisory board specific to agricultural land protection. Finally, we see implementation of acquisition of agriculturally focused easements occurring in years 3 to 10 of this 10-year funding cycle. The portion of funds that will be allocated to that will be opportunity driven unless the board decides to make a more specific motion in that regard.
The question.
Yes.
You might have spoken about it in this group, but it might have been another. The facilities for staff, they're spread out. Are they owned by the county or rented in the buildings?
Keep going.
Okay, perfect.
Currently, the need for preserve stewardship is significant. We are managing 21 distinct preserves with our county staff, totaling 23,000 acres. We have 4,500 acres of land managed by partners. That includes both state government and nonprofits. 15 conservation easements, just under 5,000 acres, which require staff monitoring. 22 of the properties acquired with ACF program funds are open for public access, and that includes both the county managed and the partner managed properties. Just on the county managed properties, we have 13 public trailheads and 58 miles of public trails, which require maintenance. In addition, in these natural areas, to maintain and improve habitat quality, we conduct a minimum of 1,200 acres of prescribed burning annually. However, our annual goal is actually 1,800 acres and will be growing as we continue to add lands, and approximately 4,000 acres of invasive plant management annually, which includes survey and treatment. Our base operational cost from our general fund funds is $31.50 an acre. When you include staffing, which also comes from general fund, that is $66 an acre. We are in a situation currently which is no longer sustainable for efficient management of the county preserves. Our staff are officed in rental space in the Siegel building. Approximately 3 miles round trip from there, we have 3 shipping containers positioned at the facility's headquarters near Depot Park. The bulk of our non-truck rolling stock, our tractors, our trailers, our fire cache trailers, and our wildland firefighting skid units and our UTVs are housed at Fleet, which is a 10-mile drive from our office, 20 miles round trip. And some of our less frequently used supplies, materials, and equipment are housed at Black Lake Preserve, which we acquired with a pole barn on site that was enclosed, that's suitable for some amount of storage. All of these sites, with the exception of Black Lake Preserve, staff require daily, multiple times a day, or multiple times a week travel, and often on one day, especially if it's a day in preparation for a prescribed burn, staff are visiting all of these sites within a day to assemble the equipment that they need in order to do the job of managing the county preserves. We have identified a site on Buck Bay Flatwoods Preserve that was part of the 2016 land acquisition, the Radiant Tract. It has not yet been added to the Registry of Protected Public Places, which allows us the opportunity to have a centralized location where we can construct a combined facility that puts our staff and equipment in the same place, improves staff safety and efficiency, and improves the efficiency of our preserve resource management.
Can I?
Yes, if that didn't address it.
No, it perfectly did. And the reason behind that, and it's more of opinion or advocacy of the commission, is understanding what funding should go where, general fund versus wild spaces. Because if there's savings associated with centralizing operations, then that can be taken from general funds. You know what I'm saying? So this is just why I asked, because I just don't want, this is not just this, but across the board, wild spaces to be seen as a piggy bank for everything, the general fund should be paying for stuff. That's my opinion. I'm just putting it out there. That's why I asked.
That is the path that we have pursued for well over a decade and a half.
Yeah.
And at this point, we have recognized that if this goal, which is critical to the continued success of our program, is going to be achieved, this is the path.
I'm 100% behind the new
Yeah.
facility.
It is we recognize what you just described.
Mhm.
This is the path.
Yeah.
So
Versus what's best and what can happen.
this,
This is
we
what
we
can
are
happen.
focused on what can happen. Just as a reminder of our staffing structure, we have 3 programs within, divisions within our program. Land stewardship, which is the bulk of our staff. We also have staff that's dedicated to land acquisition, and additionally, we house the arboriculture program. Currently, we have 16 FTEs. One position that we requested for fiscal year 23 was not funded. However, we intend to resubmit that for the mid-year funding cycle for this fiscal year. And that's a preserve ranger to assist with maintenance of the preserves, in particular, the public use facilities within the preserves, like the trails and parking lots, as well as fences and other aspects of preserve infrastructure. In addition, we will be requesting another of those positions next fiscal year to continue to expand our abilities to support the infrastructure maintenance needs on these sites, as well as the resource management needs. We are not yet ready to identify staffing needs for the years 25 through 32, because at this point, as a willing landowner opportunity-driven program, we cannot say for certain what lands we'll own, where they will be, whether they will be distinct and new sites or additions to other sites, whether they will be conservation easements or fee simple acquisitions. So what that means is that the ultimate decision of which components of the conservation lands program 10-year plan can be funded will come down to the decision about the percentage surtax funding splits. As I mentioned, $194 million is the anticipated projected income or revenue from that surtax for the wild spaces portion. With the $6 million taken off the top, these potential funding splits have been identified for your reference, Commission, and consideration to determine what portions of which of these 2 plans, both important to the county, both important to the citizens in the future, can be funded and in what way. That's it.
Awesome.
That's excellent. Thank you.
I have another question while we're on the
Sure.
slide. So the 8 years of the office for places that have passed, has the 90-10 split been achieved? Because I know it's kind of looking over the not year to year, but over the 8 years.
So for the previous was 8, now 6-year cycle, since the last 2 years were repealed. Not exactly, but pretty close.
Okay.
There were a couple items that were taken off the top in that funding cycle as well. In that funding cycle, there were allocations to the parks, the city parks and the municipalities. There was also an off the top taken for the purchase of what is now Cuskawilla Nature Center and Retreat. There was a later ask made for additional funds to support
The McNuffie one?
to support the improvement of the Cuskawilla Retreat. That was made later. So if the math was done, it would not be a perfect 90-10 of what was initially designated for 90-10, but it's actually quite close. So even in initial allocation of all of the parks funds was made at the beginning under the assumption that the surtax would go for 8 years. And the last 2 years were pulled back by our Office of Management and Budget so that in the end, the accounting would still be 90-10 since parks projects were front loaded at the beginning.
You want comments, like straight comments on things?
Sure.
Anyone? Free for all.
The first one I had was and it may just be because it's too confusing, an overlay of the acquired projects compared to the acquired parcels overlaid with the project boundaries. So basically conservation lands over the project boundaries. That's something just think about all that stuff.
I'll take a look at that.
You got a lot going on. You're gonna
It's,
lose.
there is a, time and, confusion factor that is also part of what needs to be managed, but that might be something that can be done in just like 2 colors.
The other thing is, the amount of, there is effort that goes into staff effort for conservation easements. But I'm not really aware, you guys would know, you do the monitoring yourself. And, is that a significant portion of your time?
Development of the conservation easement is the more significant portion. In terms of acquisitions, they are much more time consuming and require a higher level of investment by staff than a fee simple acquisition, unless that fee simple acquisition has some great degree of complexity. The monitoring should be done annually for each conservation easement that we have acquired. For those, there's a day site visit by 1 to 2 staff members. And then additionally, probably 1 to 2 days of coordination, planning, and preparation prior to that. And possibly a day or half a day follow-up after the site visit. If there's major violations found on the easement, then there would be additional time required. So if you say 4 days per easement, that's potentially a low end 60 days a year for 1 staff member, potentially 120 days a year for.
And the reason I ask that is because if the farmland piece becomes, if it's attractive, people start using it. What is the time frame? It seems like an agriculture easement would be more time consuming than conservation easement.
So first, I will say that yes, I think that's potentially true. It would depend on the structure of the agriculture easement program. If the easements attempted to follow what is currently the ACF template and approach for agricultural sites that we are purchasing as conservation easements, then it could be very time consuming. If the agricultural easement language for a separate program is set up to not try and gain additional environmental lift, but purely to acquire development rights and facilitate agricultural practices, similar to the Rural and Family Lands Program that the Florida Department of Agriculture administers, it could be less time consuming in a way.
Yeah, the only reason I mentioned was if you do anticipate it being a significant, depending on how you see it shaking out, I mean, it might be worth mentioning in that little discussion about the portion where you see there's maybe some unanticipated staff time and additional.
Well, and our intent is that it's a separately staffed program. But
Okay,
how many staff that is and the likelihood of when that would come to be is a big question mark. It's unknown.
but there would be a mix of money coming from the program itself and general fund, right? If it's a new program
I don't know there would be general fund.
at all.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
And then the last one, you might mention the Green Crescent. The southwestern portion of it might be a lot of ag land. It might be a large component of the agricultural. I don't know if it's.
No,
just
that's
I
something
noticed
that,
we've talked about.
Kevin and I discussed earlier today is better.
Right, great, thank you.
Yeah,
It's very easy to follow.
okay, good.
Do you perceive any need for a statement or presentation from this board for the 7th?
I think that if the Land Conservation Board were motivated to want to make a statement on the 7th, the areas that would be appropriate to do so would be with regards to your role or not role as an advisory board addressing acquisition of non-ACF type of properties, what has not been traditionally ACF property. If you have a strong reaction to anything that I just presented, in particular the use of some of these funds for operations and maintenance costs or for other infrastructure, I'd actually rather you told us right now, but, but you obviously are welcome. And they're obviously always welcome as citizens to attend any of the commission meetings and speak your thoughts and opinions. So, yeah, there hasn't been a lot of discussion of the other potential advisory boards or really the structure of this ag program. Because the first step that has not been taken, that is really only in discussion phase right now, is the study that would identify the priority areas. So until that's done, I think there are many unknowns. With that study could also be identification of scoring criteria, the structure of the program, the types of easements that could be developed.
Well, I mean,
And all of that is not happening.
the pattern that happened with this board and the whole thing was they actually had a board, preliminary board.
Pre-board.
Yeah, that kind of
Oh,
broke it out, figured out how they're going to work it. So,
It would be nice. I see it as separate parks, but it'd be nice if coming up with the strategies for prioritization of recreational property, you will have input on that from this board. And I'm saying that in the sense of I know like pushing possibility for natural uses and on the same parcels.
I will say that our staff does coordinate with park staff from mainly at the director level and at supervisor and field staff level, but above that as well. About specific needs at specific parks, specifically Cuskawilla, which is a parks property. We are responsible for management of the greatest portion of the acreage, the quote unquote natural area. Additionally, we assist at Post Springs. We conduct prescribed burns there. EPD has greater assistance with restoration projects there. We are facilitating invasive plant removal at Lake Knapphaw Park. So that there is some of that synergy that happens already in terms of recreational use. Our structure is, we're all part of the county government. We all serve the citizens of the county. We all report to the leadership of the county and the county commission. There are clear differences between active parks and conservation lands missions, but there are ways in which we can cooperate more.
and what I'm thinking of, to Kristen's point, is that I think Hogtown Creek Headwaters, when it was purchased through the county, wasn't purchased with the city. I don't even know if there was a city breakout at that point. And I think they knew all along it was going to have active rec. I think they picked up a house with it, and they were like saying that could be what is now a park, like a kids playground. So, I mean, that was when they identified right away that's what it was going to be. And that's like something that made, it's a weird one because it was in the city limits.
And that direction, now that I'm thinking about it, might go conservation, recreation rather than recreation conservation, in the sense that if it's within the populated area, like the Sink, for example, I mean, there's the city county partnership with the wetland park there too, that will have recreation, active recreation. So I maybe I'm looking at it flip side, because looking at suburban conservation land that might have an area for a park rather than looking at a park for conservation. So yeah, I might be looking at it backwards.
Yeah. The Parks Master Plan, I know, does identify locations in each commission district where active parks could be acquired and constructed. Paul, I know you had your hand up there for a bit.
Yeah, with respect to the agricultural land, the federal government has programs for buying some kind of conservation easements of land. I'm wondering how that might interact with the county. Why should the county pay for it when the feds have a program to do it? And then the second question is like, how durable are these conservation or these farmland set aside things? Is there going to be some like teeth behind the maintenance of the agricultural land, and who's going to go to court to when the farmer decides to put in a subdivision there.
You want to field that latter question?
If you want to address the conservation easement durability, that'd be great.
So long as these aren't term easements, and there won't be any term easements if I ever have anything to say about it. They're inviolate, and anybody who violates the terms of those easements. Should be held accountable, and the easement grantee is the one that has standing to do that. Whether or not the county is going to be the one to establish what these standards alone or through NRCS. I don't think we know that yet. We've received NRCS partner funds on a number of our easements, starting with the wood easement on Orange Lake. We got NRCS funds for Hitchcock, the Santa Fe River Ranch.
We did not receive those funds.
We did not.
No.
Is that still potentially as a
No,
reimbursement? It's off, okay.
that was the landowner withdrew from that process due to challenges associated with the NRCS process.
Okay,
So I can speak to the first part of your question, if that's okay.
yeah, of course.
So, yeah, USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service through Farm Bill funding, they do have robust funds for ag land easements, you know. They are great programs. They are very cumbersome to work through, and oftentimes landowners prefer to have the entity that's holding the easement not always be the federal government. So it's another option for landowners. Additionally, under those programs, you still have to have a match. So a federal program as a standalone often won't get you across the finish line, which is why having local conservation programs like Alachua County Forever, doing ag easements is so important to get those conservation acres actually across the finish line. But you can still work, especially if it's an ag easement, to kind of like layer incentives for landowners and use other NRCS funds. So it's a great match that is in existence, but still having dedicated local funds actually helps get those programs on the ground.
Yeah, and I think
Good.
like the piece that's missing from what our program has accomplished to date with conservation easements is that it has not been our focus. So when a property comes forward, either with established significant match, significant landowner donative intent, they want to donate half of the value of their conservation easements, we're only paying for half of it, or which like the Rembert or Hitchcock conservation easements or the Santa Fe River Brown conservation easement fall within our highest priority area for protection, and have a type of, in these cases, type of agricultural use that we feel is in alignment with the mission of the Alachua County Forever program. Those are the ones that have moved forward. But we have just not, because of capacity and mission, moved forward on some of the more traditional agricultural easements that also do have an importance, but they're just, if we're looking at, just like you are thinking about the mission and the scoring and what is the goal of this program, some of those easements just don't make it. So this would probably open the door for some of those easements, which do have value, to make it more, and then, as Melissa said, get across the finish line as well. But none of that, again, none of that at this point is defined, like if it will require a match or have if every easement's a bargain share, or, you know, none of all, it's very just speculative right now for the agricultural protection program. There's the intent to develop a program, but the pillars and boundaries of that are not yet created. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean,
Sure.
okay,
Kristen.
so going back to the original question of what this board did make a statement about, that, I don't want to call it competition, it's not, but it's one amount of money that the land acquisition or the easements are coming out of, and so creating a separate board for agriculture makes sense to me, but I would like this board to have some input possible, because Because the message and the language around, like what some commissioners are saying, and some other folks are saying, is that the agricultural easement has environmental benefits. So if it does, I'd like those to be bona fide before conservation board and rather than an agricultural board.
There's also gonna be agricultural easements that aren't within any of our project areas that don't really help us out at all.
That don't help the ACF mission, but that will acquire development rights primarily, and may have some other lift.
And corridors are, corridors are important too.
Just to dovetail on that comment, I would say that I would welcome and encourage active collaboration between two boards, but I do think, at least as it is currently comprised, this board is ill-equipped to assess unless it has substantial standalone conservation value. With the exception of foresters on this board, I don't think any of us are particularly well equipped to assess agricultural uses and whether or not it's sustainable. Maybe I'm wrong, but obviously there will be a lot of overlap. And I would like to see a standalone ag citizen advisory board and active collaboration whenever it is appropriate. When any property is nominated where it could potentially be meeting some of our goals as well.
We could review any of them and give our like informal blessing or not. I mean, say this is in support of what goals we have. It's fine.
In theory, yes. I mean, I would say if, can you go back, like. Keep going, go, stop. Thank you. Year 1 to 2 is complete the study and identify what this program is. That's the point at which I think more active decision-making is likely to occur. That's probably going to identify acreage targets. That's probably going to identify minimum sizes for these properties. Possibly there is an equity component that's included. Up until then, I think there are definitely things that you absolutely could and should, if you feel compelled to, provide input on. But I would anticipate that there would be another opportunity to provide input with more information to help guide that input. Right now, I think it's.
Well, now I think about it, it would be a good thing to just make sure we have a staff or a liaison from the LCB.
Yeah.
That's however that study is being conducted,
Well,
however they're coming, like that we have input.
yeah. Well, also, would the board have at least 2 positions be professional environmental, folks?
Yeah, in the structure of the board, as well as ag producers and probably ag regulating entities. I mean, there are different, there are definitely, lots of great pieces of decision and information that need to go into that process. But, and again, the county commission has not yet identified where, aside from this being a priority to consider and include, there's not been a decision yet made about where and how much. Melissa.
I just want to say, overall, the focus of the presentation, because that's what we're talking about at scale, I think did a good job, kind of like 30,000 foot look, giving the key details, what you need at minimum, and then as you work down these bullet points, like to grow into the fullest conservation program with all the tools you have in your toolbox, including the ag program. And I think in terms of the discussion around, who oversees those programs, how it's structured, I think that study from year 1 to 2 will be very insightful and also hopefully give guidance for what other programs do and just give similar structure to see it and have us have good data points moving forward. So it sounds like a good study if it gets funded.
Agreed. I think it's well done.
This is information that I've actually been wondering about, so I'm glad. Yeah.
Well, again, I think in this room, although I suppose it could end up in the main chamber February 7th. This will be when the more holistic parks and conservation lands discussion happens.
All right.
Okay, so Oh, staffing update. You want me to just do that, or you want to do it?
Proceed. Please.
We do have, Andy had it in the staffing slide. Which one it is.
Oh, at the work chart.
Yep.
Yes.
We do have, we just hired another environmental specialist, replacing me in my old positions and Milo and Neilands. We'll be working on Mike's team to help manage the conservation lands, filling the gap that I left open. We also have one
So, okay.
additional staff.
That's right. It's hilarious. When he comes back in, everybody stand up and give a round of applause and cheer for him. Okay. Whenever that is.
All right.
give us a signal.
That's ironic. We will proceed into the stewardship update. And that's hilarious. Okay, so we did commit to providing quarterly stewardship updates. And so for the first quarter of fiscal year 2023, that's October. Well, actually, it's through the beginning of January, but October, November, and December of calendar year 2022 stewardship update. You've seen this already just very recently. This is the footprint. The lands that are being acquired, our stewardship staff does work on acquisition. They do the site evaluations, as well as all of the land management, including contracting and doing the work themselves. Many of these, though not all of these lands, are managed by our stewardship team. Some of them are managed by partner agencies. You just saw this as well. We have eventually four main stewardship teams that we're trying to have in the end with these 2 position requests. Currently, we have 3. Okay, ready? All right, Kevin, if you would come up here, please. So you walked out right in the staffing update.
Who's got the blindfold?
First, many of you are aware that Kevin Ratkiss is really functionally the pillar of our land acquisition program. He is the one that is ensuring all of the contracts and the timelines and the dates, onboarding of staff like Emily and even Mike, our new negotiator. Kevin is carrying the largest load of all of that work, and he's doing it with amazing sort of calmness, organization, and success. And that is because Kevin has been an Alachua County employee for 15 years. So it's not because of that. I mean, that is why he knows the program so well, and he knows what he's doing so well. Obviously, it's also his great success is due to his personal characteristics and qualities that he brings to the board. But right, so on little 5-year benchmarks, the county does acknowledge staff, and Kevin at this point is our longest standing staff member in our program. Yeah,
You're big over.
that's right. Yeah, so you literally walked out at the moment I was gonna do that. So just
Thank you very much.
very appreciative of everything that you're bringing to the program in the county, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. All right, so again, we have mainly 3 specific teams that are a senior environmental specialist with 2 environmental specialists assigned. They have divvied the county, or we have divvied the county preserves up amongst those teams. And of course, our prescribed fire coordinator, David Hoyt, works on all the properties with all the land managers. And additionally, we are looking to provide him with the 2 maintenance staff members going forward. You would? The lands are split across a range of county preserve sizes. We have 2 preserves that hit the 6,000 acre mark. That's Bar Hammock and Laclusa Slough. And then we have a range of preserves in the 1,000 to 2,000 acre mark. and some that are less than 1,000 acres. All of the ones, and these are just the ones that are managed by our staff. So all of those preserves require maintenance, stewardship, and additionally, if they're open to the public, they require increased focus on public safety and accessibility. We have 15 easements, and that monitoring or management is done by the land acquisition team. That's traditionally been Kevin, and now that will be one of the duties that Emily is assuming as well. Good. By color, the red preserves, Ryan, who is still here, even though he's going to be burning tomorrow and having a long day. So the red colored preserves are assigned to Ryan's team for management. The green colored preserves are assigned to Mike Nelson's team for management. And the orange colored preserves, which is mainly Laclusa Slough and Pfeiffer Flatwoods and a couple others, are assigned to Scott Crosby. And then all the other colors are basically not actively managed on the ground by our staff. They're managed by partners, or their conservation easements managed by the landowner with our consultation. This is the same information you saw in the previous presentation. Quarter one of fiscal year 2023, so that was up through December 31st. We had conducted 51 acres of prescribed burning, reworked close to 100 miles of fire lines, and prepared 3,500 acres for burning. We're in quarter two now. Staff burned midweek. They're burning again tomorrow. This is a key time for our stewardship staff in that particular area. Good. Invasive species in quarter one, staff had surveyed and or treated 600 acres on 11 different preserves. The annual goal is currently about 3,600 acres. So working towards that goal, there have been 4 preserve projects that have been bid out for contractor treatment to help alleviate some of the commitment that staff would need to give on that. 23 different species under treatment. And we did have a couple, essentially what's like a grant funded project completed by FWC on two sites. Restoration activities. We did receive some gifted wiregrass seedlings, and those were planted at Turkey Creek Preserve. We have a significant road improvement project for service roads, forest roads at Laclusa Slough that is in the process of having an invitation to bid sent out to contractors, provide better access. We did also finally complete the Bar Hammock timber sale. That was a mighty struggle, went on for 4 years of contractor default, and then struggling to get it rebid and getting it rebid and sold. And over the last quarter of fiscal year 22 and the first quarter of fiscal year 23, it was a total of 311 acres. So the majority of it was done this fiscal year, and will set us up for, with some burning, some wonderful flatwoods restoration at Bar Hammock. Outreach, so far we've got 2 outreach events completed. I mainly stuck this in so that if you're not aware, this weekend at Austin Carey Forest as part of the University of Florida, many partners, including our staff, will be hosting the Flatwoods Fire and Nature Festival, which includes burn demonstrations, live animals, educational exhibits, the opportunity to see folks that work in wildland fire and talk to them about what they do from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. No dogs allowed unless it's a service animal. Carpooling is encouraged. You can Google it, I think. In this quarter, at the very beginning of the quarter, we did open Buck Bay Preserve to public access, public recreational access. And, if you haven't been out there yet, encourage you to go check it out.
It's really, I've been a few times, it's really nice.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Ryan manages that site. We did present the Black Lake Preserve management plan and recreational master plan. This is like the Ryan show to the Board of County Commissioners. Ryan did it earlier in January, and he did an excellent job. The plan was adopted with a few informational comebacks that were requested. We also think and hope that we held our last neighborhood meeting for Four Creeks Preserve master plan and recreational plan with the Westchester neighborhood. That was the last neighborhood we hadn't gotten to yet. Still focused on parking lot off of 43rd Street and trying to push that boulder forward. And that's the stewardship update.
Thank you.
Questions? All right.
Hearing none,
Now
any
old
business,
Look at the sign sheet.
business.
commission appointment of new members. What is that meeting date?
Well, old business first, I think,
That,
number 6.
oh, yes, sorry. LCB workshop discussion. We've talked about this a bit. We agreed to postpone until after the election. That obviously has happened. You guys have any thoughts about a meeting time and possibly location?
We have come up with a couple of potential dates for your consideration. Bringing it up with the new members will be, this is going to be a point for the next item on the agenda, but the decision for that will hopefully be the 14th meeting on February 14th. For that, and I'll go into more detail when that comes up. But as far as possible dates for a workshop, potentially March 4th will be the earliest, followed by April 1 or April 8th. If we're wanting to keep it relatively.
Okay.
Those are all Saturdays. So that would be to discuss. Doesn't have to be decided today, and obviously, and I know we have members that are here right now. And also something to consider is how much time you guys are interested in committing to this type of workshop. So the workshop is for you all and for your benefit. So how much of the portion of Saturday you guys are hoping to spend on topics of discussion.
So I note we've got 3 board members whose terms ended at the end of last year, Ed, Russ, and BJ. I have it on good information that both Ed and BJ will be throwing their hat in the ring for another term. Do we know about Russ?
Yes, that's also.
Okay. Well, not to presume anything, but I personally hope all 3 of them remain. Obviously, we're going to need to wait, and it would be kind of impossible to get a workshop in before the 14th, but I do think it would be good to make sure that we have a current and full board here before we do that. So continue, sorry.
No, yeah, and again, that will be decided February 14th.
Right.
March 4th was the earliest date
March 4th, okay.
that we have thrown out. as a possibility. Be that early, can be later than April 8th as well. Is
My only comment for the location would be, we talked about this before, while it's nice to be inspired by going somewhere out in the middle of nowhere.
Logistically not optimal.
It's easier when everybody has it.
Yep, understandable flat, and we also have to make sure it's accessible to.
Tuscaloosa.
That wouldn't be a bad spot. Tuscaloosa.
That's Micanopy, if anyone's not on there yet.
I'm like even thinking it's to be easier, but you ask now, you like Northeast Park, like the senior center, I think you could reserve that.
Or Hogtown Greenway, that's really nice. Have you been inside the building?
I haven't inside it,
They
so,
did a good job.
yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely open to options that we can look into that facilitate this. sort of
The
meeting.
easiest one that we had, and I mentioned to you before, was when we actually had it at the Walla Nature Center.
On the 34th.
Yeah, it was really not a whole lot of hassle.
Yeah.
The one that was in Molina was cool, but it's also like,
Yeah.
that was like the entire day. And
So I don't think we have a
got to
draft.
6.
I don't think we have a draft agenda. Yeah, I'd like to maybe shore up a draft agenda at our next meeting. And then make a determination based on that and how much progress we make when we'll actually have the workshop.
So, what date is our next meeting?
February 23rd.
So I doubt March 4th will be on the table.
Yeah,
That rate of the date. but-
agreed.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
I agree that seems unlikely.
If we wait.
So sticking to the February is save the date.
You don't happen to know what our agenda is looking like, if how many nominations we might be entertaining at our next meeting, do you?
Currently at least one.
Okay,
Possibly two.
Possibly two Belgian farms comes online.
right. Well, let's make sure we have on that agenda, a workshop agenda planning discussion. Anything else on this item?
That's the workshop agenda.
Just for your consideration, again, the workshop is for you all. We've had some discussion of topics that could be discussed at the workshop, both with you all and from input outside of these meetings. So just some things that have been thrown out there just for your consideration. Again, things can be changed, things added or taken away, especially in light of the presentation, we just give some of these non-ideas relevant anymore. So potentially an overview, a brief overview of the acquisition process, how it works from start to finish, and emphasizing the board's role in that process. Brief program overview, where the program started, where we're going, what we've accomplished, what our goals and needs are, and how the conservation landscape within the county has changed over that time and what it might mean for our priorities going forward. In addition, or similarly to that, what are our current focuses, priorities, overarching goals, big picture, as well as long and short-term goals for the program, what's currently on the active acquisition list, identifying what are the current keystone parcels and bottleneck parcels that will be further up future corridors or projects. And in that same vein, again, as Andy has been presenting, like what corridor focuses are we working on within the county? Additionally, looking at our program's contribution to landscape-wide conservation, other efforts outside of the county as well. So we, again, can only purchase land within the county. But again, there are other agencies that are working outside of our boundaries and kind of taking a step back and at least getting a bigger picture view of some of the things that are happening outside of the county, how we fit into that, and agencies and other agencies that we're working with and cooperating with. We've just done this for stewardship updates that kind of gives you some land management update information, but if you're interested in about the land management side of things, that could be a topic. Conservation easements and what goes into them could be delved into as well, the process for that and how that works going forward. And any more information about a 10-year sure tax update or anything like that, but we don't have all the information about that, but if there's any information about the workshop date that can be done as well. Again, these are just things that have been briefly mentioned and or discussed as potential topics of interest. But you guys, again, this workshop is for you all and your benefit, so it should be focused on what you're most interested in prioritizing and focused on. So those can be building blocks or stepping stones to an actual agenda for whatever workshop.
That's better than good as a starting point for an agenda. Thank you.
Would it be possible to, that was a very comprehensive list, to have that emailed out to us just sometime before the next meeting, so you can kind of like read through and reflect on
Yeah,
what would be.
that'd be good.
Can include that in the agenda packet for the next meeting, but also it could potentially be sent sooner.
Agenda packet would be great.
Thank you.
Very good. Anything further on that? Okay, next meeting date is February 23rd. As always, we need a quorum. If anybody knows that they're not going to be present, let us know. You won't be? Okay. All right. Any members of the public have any?
One more thing.
Yes.
Tagging on to the new membership appointments, again, that's happening on the 14th, hopefully, of the VOCC meeting. All three of the current members whose terms have expired have reapplied. And we've also gotten an additional, there were 15 applicants total, 10 total, including the current members for the natural resource professional positions. The current positions, all three are natural resource professional positions. With the press release, we did get interest from 5 other people who are interested in potential citizen large positions as well. So we've had a decent amount of interest from the public.
Good. Very good. All right. The questions, comments from the public?
Can I get your name?
Rory, yeah, I didn't get to sign it yet, Rory.
Rory?
Yeah.
That's not good.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it is. I know who you are. All right. No public comments, motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moves.
All those in favor?
Um,
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Good to see you. Appreciate it. Yes.
I'm covering for,